So with any one of those images selected, like this owl image, you'll come over to the Behaviors panel, click on this little tiny arrow just to the bottom and right of that plus sign, and choose Swap Image. Now think about this for a moment. We have the image that we identified as banner. That's the banner at the top of the page. We have our egret, elk, and owl images. These are our thumbnails here on the left. And then we have the image we called main. What we're doing here is setting it up so that when someone rolls their cursor over this owl image, they actually change the main image. So Dreamweaver had owl selected when I first opened this dialog because that's the image I have selected. But what I really want to do is to change the main image. So I need to select main before I hit the browse button. Now I chose the owl image, so I want to swap it with the larger owl image. Don't be confused that this is a different picture of an owl. It's actually a different picture of the same owl. But I thought it would be more interesting to have slightly different pictures appear on the right when someone selects the image on the left. So this is the image that I want to replace the egret picture when someone triggers that other image. Click OK, and although you won't see any change in the page itself, notice here in the Behaviors panel that we now have that Swap Image and Swap Image Restore automatically set up. Let's do another one and I'll explain a little more about what's happening as we go along. So here we select the elk image, and notice now the Behaviors panel is blank because no behaviors have been associated with this image yet. So we'll select the Swap Image behavior, and elk is selected, but what do we really want to change here? That's right, we want to change the main image. And we want to change that main image to another picture of the elk. So we want to browse, and we want to find the elk 500. Now again, you want to make sure that all of the images that you're swapping, all of these images on the right, are sized to the same height and width, because once again, the images are going to be replacing each other. So I created all of these images and set them up to be exactly the same size. When I choose this, you see the source is now set to this elk picture. And notice there are two little options here at the bottom. Preload images, which is optional, allows the browser to load all of the images that will be swapped as the page is loaded. This enables you to speed up the process just a little bit so that when someone rolls their cursor over an image like this elk, the larger image of the elk is already preloaded into the page, even though it's not visible yet. And that'll just make the rollover effect happen more quickly. If you have a page that has lots and lots of images, you might choose not to preload these because it will take the page so much longer to load in the first place. Also notice here, Restore Images on Mouse Out is optional. When we set up that initial rollover effect, you saw that when you rolled your cursor over the image it switched, and when you rolled it off the image, it switched back. But sometimes you may not want it to switch back. So just for the purposes of seeing how these different options work, I'm going to deselect this so we don't do the On Mouse Out Restore Image. You'll see in a moment how that plays out. Now when I click OK, again there's no visible change in Dreamweaver's workspace. We'll have to preview the page to actually see these rollovers in effect. But here in the Behaviors panel, notice that I have a swap image, but I don't have the On Mouse Out Swap Image Restore. And that will make a big difference when we preview it. Finally, although you don't have to do this, I'm going to set up the same swap image for this egret picture, even though I'm just going to have the same image appear. Because I don't replace the image after someone rolls their cursor off this elk, I'm going to need to have a swap image for that egret to reappear when I roll a cursor over this. And again, I think you'll see this better when we test it in a moment. But let's go through this process one last time. I've got the small image selected. I choose Swap Image. Now my egret picture is chosen here, but the one I'm actually going to switch, that's right, my main image. So select Main. And now we want to browse, and even though it's the image that appears there, I can select this as the swap image to make sure that if another image is in this place, this one will be brought back. And I'm going to leave these options in this case. So we've got our behavior all set up. We've got all three images set to change this image here on the right. Let's save the page. I'm just using Command S to save the page, and let's preview it in a browser. The simple option here, the first one we set up, on mouse over, I see the bigger image of my owl. On mouse out, it restores the image of the egret. Next you see the elk. On mouse over, I see the bigger image of the elk, and this time, because I didn't set up that restore, that larger picture of the elk remains visible even when I roll my cursor back off this image. So you get the restore effect here with the owl, and you don't get the restore effect here with the elk. But now finally, because I don't restore it after the elk, I needed to set up that swap image for the egret for it to appear when I roll my cursor over this image. So you see how this swap image effect can be a great little tool when you want to create a series of images in a simple little interactive gallery. And finally, going back to Dreamweaver, remember you have choices about how you trigger those behavior effects. So in addition to on mouse over, I could choose to use something like on click. In this case now, the user would have to actually click on this small image of the egret for this bigger image to appear on the right. And you can choose from any number of options. Another question I get all the time is what's the difference between the A and the not A? Well, the ones with the A are if you've actually used the anchor tag or the link tag. So when we set up that rollover in the previous lesson and we linked it to another page, then we needed the A option. If you're not using a link, in this case we're just switching the image on the right, then you can just choose on click. So that's just a quick look at some of the more advanced features in Dreamweaver. Notice that there are many behaviors here in Dreamweaver, and there are some restrictions about which behaviors are available depending on a couple of factors. One of them is what you've selected. So when you select an image, you have some behavior options, but not all of them. Some behaviors, such as the jump menu behavior, are restricted to other features on the page. Similarly, you can restrict the number of events or the number of behaviors options by choosing which targeted browser or which version of HTML you want to target. That is to say, if you want to make sure your site works in older versions of Internet Explorer like 4.0 or 5.0, you might select this option, but when you do, you'll find far fewer behaviors available to you because they weren't supported by those older browser versions. By default, Dreamweaver selects HTML 4.01. I think that's a pretty good option, so I'll leave that for now. But I wanted you to see that you do have the ability to restrict it, and if you don't see all of the options I see here, this may be the cause. Finally, one of the coolest things in Dreamweaver, and a message that I'll leave you with here, is the ability to get more behaviors. If you're connected to the internet and you select this option in Dreamweaver, you should launch a browser and go to the Adobe Exchange website, where you can actually search through a number of different additional features that you can add to Dreamweaver. This is a little like adding filters to Photoshop or extending other programs you might have. You can download new behaviors, install them into Dreamweaver, and explore some of the many ways that you can expand on the features in Dreamweaver. Thanks for joining me for this Dreamweaver CS4 Essentials training. I hope this program has helped you get started with Dreamweaver and inspired you to want to learn even more. You can find out more about me, as well as order more of my videos on my site at www.digitalfamily.com. And you'll find lots more great video training at totaltraining.com. See you online!